I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. For those of you, I know most of you, to be honest, who are on right now, which is exciting. My name's Candace Heckel. We are with James Currie from Great Plains Conservation, who is kind enough to join us in his lovely home in West Palm Beach, Florida, sitting next to Doug Herbert, co-owner of Africa Endeavours. So as many of you might have seen in the intro email you received, tonight we're going to just do a little bit of a dive into some of our favorite places in Africa. So Kenya, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. And then after that, James is going to discuss some exciting conservation work they've got going on in Zimbabwe and how you can possibly get involved. So without further ado, Corinne's going to show you a quick video. She's working behind the scenes. She's not normally the techie one. So she's going to show you a quick video with a great overview of Great Plains Conservation and some of the really cool places you can stay and also some of the amazing work that they do.
At Great Plains, it's about the luxury of space. The small details. The warmth of our hospitality. About looking into the eyes of Africa. Each welcome is theatrical. Each day, an experience. This is the greatest show on earth, and you have front row seats. True luxury is about space and time. It's about free spirit. About embracing an adventurous life. We take you to that place in Great Plains style.
We're going to start with Kenya. So I thought we'd first kind of dive into why visit Kenya, what are some of our favorite reasons for going and why we do love the destination. I'm going to start, ladies first. For me personally, I think Kenya is great for the diversity of experiences, like hiking up in the Namanya Conservancy or, horse riding down in Oldonyo. Or camel rides in Lewa. There's just like a bunch of different things that you can do that you might not necessarily find elsewhere. I also love a lot of the owned and operated community projects they have going on, like Breteti up in the north, which is an owned and run by the Samburu, which is a unique concept, and it's an elephant sanctuary for basically any elephants that are orphaned north of the equator. So if you're interested in learning more about that as well, we can chat about that further. But I thought Doug and James could talk a little bit too about their experiences, what they do love about Kenya.
So, Mr. Currie, one of the interesting things about Great Plains is start by where they operate. They operate in the concessions that are north of some of the major heavy trafficked areas, and get into why that is a benefit for people and what the experience is like there compared to down on where a lot of the crossings are going. And what we're speaking about is, and James get into this, it's it is a wide open spaces, just what you would think when you have in your mind of what Kenya is where the camps from Great Plains are situated, out of the chaos. And I think it's a really big benefit. And James, let you go from there.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. So yeah, Kenya is very special because it's a quintessential East African safari destination. So when you think about the migration, there's no other place in the world that you can witness that spectacle of our planet except in Tanzania and Kenya. And the Masai Mara, where our camps are situated, is basically the northern limit of the Serengeti. It just has a different name, but it is actually the Serengeti. And so when you go and see a migration or a crossing at a river, that is generally happening between July, August, and September, those 3 months. And then the migration does an entire loop. It goes back into Tanzania. They go and give birth in Tanzania, and then they come back around, follow the rains, and then they come back into the Masai Mara again. So it's a circle of life that happens every single year, and it is one of the true splendors of our planet. But with that, you are generally witnessing the migration and the river crossings in the reserves, which means that you can have, 100, 200 vehicles at one river crossing. And so our camps are situated just outside the reserve with access into private conservancies. So you get the best of both worlds. You spend a day going down to see the migration, to see the spectacle. Maybe it's a hot air balloon ride down and a drive back, and you wait for a river crossing before your drive back to camp. And then once you've experienced the migration, you get out of the maddening crowds and you get into the private conservancies. And that's where the real magic happens, because the wildlife viewing there is completely private. There's very few vehicles, only the vehicles from the camps in those private conservancies. And we limit the amount of vehicles in the sighting. So whereas you can see, 20, 30 vehicles around a cheetah sighting in the reserve, in the private conservancies, there'll never be more than 4 vehicles in that sighting because it's strictly controlled. And that's the beauty of having access to the reserve, but then also to the private conservancies that surround the reserve. And there's no fences. So the wildlife moves freely between the conservancies and the reserve itself. And, there have been occasions when our guests have been sitting at Mara Plains and they've had a crossing on the Chachichak River, where our camp is located, right from the veranda, and they've just had hundreds, if not thousands, of wildebeest crossing that river right in front of camp. So it does happen, but generally you're going into the reserves for the crossing.
And James, if clients aren't interested in necessarily witnessing the Great Migration and just want a taste of Kenya, can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to travel in what we call green season, and when you would recommend going to experience still incredible wildlife, but maybe avoid some of the crowds?
Yeah, that's a good question, Candice. And actually, there's actually 2 different subspecies of wildebeest. There's a subspecies that does the migration, and then there's another subspecies of wildebeest in the same area that is a little bit larger, a little bit darker than the migratory wildebeest, but they also do a local migration during green season. So between the months of January through to April, these wildebeest migrate from the Masai Mara up to the higher elevation areas where we have a camp called Mara Nika, which is a really beautiful camp. So you can witness it's a smaller migration. It's not as spectacular, but all the predators, as soon as that migration leaves in October, the grasses start to get long in the reserve, and most of the wildlife, the wildebeest and the zebra, migrate up to the short grass plateaus, which is where the private conservancies are. And it's there between January through to about April that you can witness this Loyita migration of wildebeest, and all the predators follow all the game up there. So you have incredible predator viewing at those times of the year. It's also the low season, so you're getting much better pricing. And it's also the time when most of the antelope are dropping their young. And so we call it the time of plenty. in the Masai Mara. It's really beautiful. You've got migratory birds everywhere. You've got baby animals everywhere. And you've got predators following that smaller Loita migration at that time of the year. The one difference to, let's say, East Africa and Botswana, which we'll come to in a little moment, is that the long rains actually happen in Kenya in April and May, sometimes into early June. And a lot of people are dissuaded from visiting Kenya at this time of the year, but I love it. You know, generally the rains are in the afternoons. The mornings are often quite nice, bright and clear. So you get a nice morning game drive and the vehicles are covered. So if it thunders down and rains down for 2 hours or an hour on your game drive, as soon as it stops raining, everything comes out. It's bright, it's emerald green, and you've got babies everywhere and you've got predators hunting. So Kenya really is a year-round destination, as is Botswana and Zimbabwe. It's just that the rains happen at different times of the year in both regions.
Thanks, James. I always thought, why would you not be a resident wildebeest? Like, why go through the whole thing if you could just live right there in paradise?
Grass is always greener.
Yeah, some people are just some people are cleverer than others, and I think same about the animal, I guess.
Do you want to
work exactly?
Do you want to talk a little bit about Old Donyo and what sort of experiences you can have down there in that part of Kenya and what makes that unique?
Yeah, sure. So at any time of the year, a really good combination for a superb itinerary in Kenya is to combine the Masai Mara, spend 4 nights there or even longer, depending on how much time you have, and then go down to a region called the Chulu Hills. This is close to the Tanzanian border. I'm sure you're all familiar with Mount Kilimanjaro. The lodge looks out on Mount Kilimanjaro, which is actually obviously in Tanzania, although you'll find a lot of Kenyans will say it actually should be Kenya. And they've been trying for years to claim Mount Kilimanjaro as part of Kenya. But it is a really spectacular destination, very different to the Mara. Big mountains and hills. We've actually got mist forest up in the hills behind the lodge, and then a big plain, a big open plain at the bottom. And this area is famed for the last super tusker elephants on our planet. And a super tusker elephant is an elephant with at least one tusk weighing 100 pounds or more. And there's only about 25 individuals left on planet Earth. And 2 of them are found right at Old Donyo Lodge. They come into the watering hole sometimes daily during dry season. And then nearby, we have Amboseli National Park and Tsavo National Park, which is broken up into 2 parts. It's Tsavo East and Tsavo West. And we have a helicopter based at the lodge there. So you can fly, it's our own helicopter. You can fly 15 minutes down to Amboseli, have an incredible elephant and wildlife experience there. And I would say if you're going to Old Donyo, you want to spend at least 3 nights, preferably 4 nights in that region, because there's so much to do. You can go mountain biking, you can go horse riding with cheetah and elephant and zebra and wildebeest. It's absolutely fantastic. And then you can spend a lot of time at the blinds, which we call hides in Africa. And we've got a sunken ground hide, which is at eye level to the ground. And you're looking up at these big tusker elephants coming down to drink at the watering hole, framed in the background with Mount Kilimanjaro. So it's excellent for photography. And right next to it at the lodge, we've got an above ground hide. And when I go down there, I hardly go on game drive. I spend most of my days down in those hides or blinds and have lunch down there. We've got Wi-Fi and plug points down there, and the waiters will bring down a bottle of rosé for you to look at the elephants and enjoy a bottle of rosé as well. So it really is a fantastic place with lots of activities and lots of diversity, and very different to the Mara. And then if you want a longer itinerary in Kenya, you can always add on the northern part of Kenya, Laikipia, which is also very, very different. So you've got an option of a really good circuit of 3 different areas in one itinerary in Kenya, which makes it really special. And of course, we have the beautiful Kenyan coast as well, if you want to extend it even further.
That's definitely
what's the birding situation like in the two areas of
Oh,
Kenya.
you're going to get James started on birds. We're
Oh,
never going to
Well,
leave.
I have to toss it.
I better keep this one brief. Everybody's falling asleep. Yeah, Kenya for many years claimed the record as having the most bird species in Africa. There's now a lot of neighboring countries in Africa which say they have more bird species: Uganda, Tanzania, Central African Republic. And every year, new bird species are being discovered in these more remote areas of Africa. But, you know, Kenya has at least 11 to 1,200 bird species, depending on how you count them. So it is unbelievable when you consider that Botswana, which is also a very bird-rich country, but it's landlocked, only has about 600 species. So double the amount of species of birds found in Kenya. So yeah, it's a fantastic birding location. And again, each place or each region you go to in Kenya is going to hold different species of birds. So you can get a very well-rounded birding experience by doing the three regions that I've just mentioned to you.
You also have different species north of the equator as well, like what do they call them? The northern big five, with the gerenuk and reticulated giraffe and things like that, gravy zebra. So you do, if you add in the north, you do get to see some different species, which is pretty exciting as well. So moving on, just to not, I mean, I love Kenya, but we do have a few more places to cover as well. I guess we can start maybe transitioning into Botswana, but I would, maybe you can kind of talk really big picture, James, what the differences really are between Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. And I know that's might be a lot, but just maybe a few highlights so people can kind of wrap their head around, you know, what destination might be a better fit for them.
Yeah, absolutely, Candice. I think, you know, it's useful for those that haven't been to Africa before to categorize safaris into 5 major buckets. That's what I always do. You've got a quintessential East African safari, which we've just spoken about, which centers around the migration and, you know, think Lion King, for example, those beautiful savannas and open plains. That is what most people think about when they think about safari. Then we've got another bucket, which is called primate safaris, and those are amazing to combine with Kenya. So looking at the two countries of Uganda and Rwanda, it's only about an hour's flight between the two countries, and you can do an amazing primate experience with chimpanzees and gorillas. The third bucket would be what we call a South African safari, and these are South African safaris. We're looking at mainly the Kruger National Park area, places like Pinda in the northeastern part of South Africa. They're very different to East African safaris and Botswana safaris because those reserves are fenced. There's a lot of people in those countries, and to mitigate the conflict between wildlife and people, those areas are fenced. So yes, you can go to the Sabi Sands, and a lot of first-time goers on safari do a South African safari. You'll see incredible wildlife, but on smaller pieces of land. So when you go to the Sabi Sands, for example, you might be driving on an area that's about 3,000 or 4,000 hectares, and you'll see a fence line or two, and you might drive the same route quite a lot. Whereas when you go to Botswana and East Africa, you're driving on areas, in some cases, that are hundreds of thousands of hectares, so completely free with no fences. The fourth bucket would be what we call desert safaris, and that takes place in places like Namibia and the Kalahari region of southern Botswana. And the fifth bucket is what we're coming to now, which is what we term water-based safaris. And those take place in both Botswana and Zimbabwe. And they give you the opportunity to not only enjoy a safari from a vehicle, but to get out on foot, do incredible walks, to get out on mekoros, which are dugout canoes, where a guy poles you through the waters of the Okavango Delta, and you can watch elephants crossing in front of you, and hippos around you, and crocs. And then you can do canoes, you can do boat trips, tiger fishing, which Doug and Corinne and myself took part in November last year in Zimbabwe, which is absolutely some of the best fishing you can do anywhere on the planet. So you're getting the option to experience both a water safari and a land safari at the same time. I will just mention that because you are getting this completely different perspective, and all our camps in Botswana, like they are in Kenya, are in private concessions. We call them concessions in Botswana. We call them conservancies in East Africa, but ultimately they're the same thing. But Botswana safaris are definitely the most expensive safari option. And they're the most expensive because they're the best. You're getting the best of both worlds. If you want some kind of a compromise, then Zimbabwe, which we'll come to as well, is a really good option. Great value, same level of camps, water-based and land-based, but at a much lower price because it's not as popular as Botswana.
So, James, that will bring me to one of my next points, is what some of the unique selling points are of Botswana, which you have mentioned, but maybe for people who haven't been, help them understand why it is so expensive. I mean, you were kind enough to host me last year, and I got to stay at Duba Explorer, Zarafa, and then I had a 2-bedroom suite at their new camp, Sitatunga, which I think James kind of messed up on. Because it was amazing. But I walked in and I thought it was the actual lodge, and they're like, no, this is just your space. So that could lead to some of the cost as well. But I will say, I hadn't been to Botswana since 2019 just because of COVID and everything. And I remember taking the helicopter at Duba Explorer and landing and getting into the boat because I arrived late, and we did the boat ride through the channel while the sun was setting. And I was like, this place, I forgot how unbelievably amazing it is. And there really is nowhere else like it in the world. So maybe you can speak to why it does cost a little bit more than some of these other places.
Yeah, there's a very easy reason for that, really. And that is that our camps are very, very remote. Botswana is a country that is also very sparsely populated. There's only just over 2 million people in the entire country, which is probably the same as Palm Beach County, Florida, where I live, over an area that's absolutely massive. So being so remote, our operating costs are actually a lot higher in a place like Botswana. We have to fly in almost everything for the camp. And also, it's important to remember that wherever we operate, we own the structure of the lodge, but we actually lease the operations from local communities. And so we pay quite expensive leases in a place like Botswana versus the leases that we pay in Zimbabwe and Kenya. And that also adds to the cost of the safari. But besides the actual fixed costs of running a safari, the experience in a place like Botswana is absolutely magical. You're flying in over the Okavango Delta, which is one of the largest inland deltas in the world. As we know, most rivers flow to the ocean, or they try to. This is in the case of the rivers that flow into northern Botswana. But what happens in northern Botswana is you have tectonic shifts and geological activity that have created basically a depression in the middle of the desert, the Kalahari Desert. And the water flows all the way down from Angola. It reaches Botswana, northern Botswana, in mid to late April, and it sticks around until October, November, when it recedes again. So this is actually paradoxically the dry season in Botswana, but it's the wet season because the floodwaters from the rains in December and January have come down from Angola and flooded into this massive desert. And it is one of the most beautiful places on our planet. You can see with regularity wild dogs hunting, incredible leopard viewing, some of the most amazing lion sightings in the world at a place like Duba, where you're watching lions hunting predominantly during the day. And so our record at Duba Plains, I'll throw this in there as a little trivia, is 13 kills in 5 days that our guests witnessed. 13 lion kills in 5 days. And so you're seeing lions hunting in the day. You've got hippos and crocs and water and boats and makoros and canoes and walking and game drives, which makes it really, really special.
Yeah, it is an amazing place.
Very remote.
We have been blessed as well to have seen some of these camps. And I think the one thing that is striking is the fact that when you leave the lodge for the day, you're likely not going to see anybody
You will not see
for,
another person.
for another. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, you feel like you're on the edge of the earth. These things are that, and with a chaotic world that we tend to live in, especially those of us that live in the cities or even here in Florida, that the remoteness of that really does stick out. I think that's why Corinne's on here as well. I think what's one of the things we remember the most about that was, wow, this is really special. You feel like you are literally the only ones and you really are, for miles and miles. And the fishing, we didn't talk about the fishing. The fishing there was really good there for tiger fishing. And one of the bubble runs was going, and that was an interesting thing to see. There's always something going on, at least from our perspective, that you just don't see other places. And that's what made Botswana special. And one thing you didn't mention, and I'll let you talk about it if you want, about the reasoning Botswana has kind of structured the tourism business as opposed to some of the other countries, if that's worth even getting into. About there's just not that many camps.
Yeah, sure. So that is actually one of the reasons why Botswana is more expensive as well, is that about 10 years ago, the old government in Botswana embarked on a policy of low volume tourism, but high dollar value tourism, whereas Kenya does mainly the opposite. It's low value tourism and high volume. So when you go into a place like the Masai Mara, or you go to Tanzania, which does the same thing, you're going to see hundreds of vehicles from everywhere in these national parks, whereas Botswana has that very strictly controlled. So taking advantage of massive tracts of land with some of the best wildlife viewing on earth, and not seeing a lot of people. Yes, you pay a higher price for it, but you're not going to see other vehicles and other people when you're on safari.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I think I remember, maybe it was you, but I think it was Derek, one of the co-founders, talking about when you build a camp, you look at, and you're pricing it, you look at, what do I need to charge in order to protect this land? So just so you know, Great Plains Conservation, all the money they make goes back into the conservation. So when you're staying with them, your dollar is going to a good place to support conservation and community. And so that's just something I try to explain as well to clients when they're, asking about pricing and things, because I feel like it's really important for people to know that they're contributing to protecting these important places. That being said, what do you think as far as, I know we're Americans, we have limited time to get away. What would your ideal itinerary be ideal for an American be in Botswana? And how many days would you think in the Delta, perhaps visiting some other destinations in the area as well?
Well, I'm going to let you all in on a secret, which those of us in the industry, it's not so much a secret anymore looking at our booking sheets, but the very best time, if you're flexible in your travels, the very best time to travel to Botswana is probably the last 2 weeks in April through to the first 2 weeks of June. And the reason for that is the high season pricing kicks in on June 15th. The reason for that is not because it's a better time to go to Botswana. The reason for that is it's dictated by the predominant American travel season. So when holidays start, when people can travel with their kids. But if you're flexible and you can go in May or the first 2 weeks in June, you're getting all the benefits of the dry season. You're getting the flood from the Okavango, but you're getting it at about a third, if not more, of the cost that you would pay starting on June 15th to October 15th. So I would recommend that. And I'd also combine Botswana definitely with like Victoria Falls. If you haven't been there, do a combination of 2 different camps, do a water-based Okavango Delta camp, and then go up to the northern part of Botswana and spend some time in the Linyanti region, which also gives you access to water and land, and then maybe 2 nights to see Victoria Falls, and very easy to connect to Cape Town as well, to have a bit of a city and a cultural and a wine and a scenic experience in one of the most beautiful cities on earth. So Botswana is uniquely positioned to combine all those aspects in one safari. And I also just want to highlight that, previously 10 years ago, we would never have said that you can combine Kenya with Botswana, for example. But now the airlines have made it really amazing for us. So if you have a lot of time on your hands and you can do and afford a 3-week safari, to go in like April, May, June, and combine Kenya with Botswana is very easy now, because they're direct flights from Nairobi directly into Victoria Falls. You can spend 2 nights in Victoria Falls and then connect very easily into Botswana as well. So the world's your oyster, really, when it comes to Africa these days.
Thank you, James. I think I was unaware even of the combo with Kenya and Botswana, so that was actually very helpful. And just as far as I know, we talked a little bit about that April to October timeframe. If clients were looking to do more of the low season, November through February timeframe, what can they expect in Botswana? Temperature, game wise? Obviously, the floods aren't in that time of year. So, what sort of experience can you expect that time of year?
Yeah, so October through to, I would say, April, it gets very, very hot in Botswana. We're talking days in the middle of the day, easily 100 degrees. And it doesn't really cool down that much at night, but it starts cooling down around April again. Having said that, all our reserve level camps have beautiful air conditioning over the beds, so that you can at least sleep peacefully at night, or if you want to take a siesta in the middle of the day. And remember that your game drives are taking place in the early mornings and late afternoons, when it's actually the cooler time of the day and when the wildlife's more active. Like in Kenya, at that time of the year, you've got baby animals, you've got lots of migrant bird species, birds like carmine bee eaters, which are absolutely stunning. They're these beautiful pink bee eaters that fly around in these big flocks. It's really beautiful to witness that. And great predator and wildlife viewing at that time of the year as well. It's just hot, and it does rain in the afternoons. But whereas in Kenya it can rain all night, in Botswana generally we're having short, heavy thunder showers in the afternoons with bright, clear mornings. And so you can still have a fantastic game drive experience at that time of the year. And Corinne, Doug, and Candice, you probably don't know this yet, but we've just put in air conditioning into Dubai Explorers as well now for October, November, December. So each tent has air conditioning in that Explorer level camp, and the plan is to actually roll out air conditioning into all the Explorer level camps for that time of the year as well. So that means you can take advantage of the lower price of the Explorer level camps, which I personally love, but still be in comfort and have the air conditioning in your room. So really the heat doesn't become a factor then, because you're not going on game drive during the hottest time of the day.
Correct. And lots of birds too that time of year, I assume, right? James is heaven.
Yeah.
Just really quick before we dive into Zimbabwe, and I forgot to mention, if you guys do have any questions, please just pop it in the chat, and Corinne, our tech guru in the background, is gonna kind of let us know what's coming through and give us a moment to answer some of those before we start talking about Project Rewild. So please feel free to ask any questions if you have them. And we will move on to Zimbabwe. So James, you're South African and you're a guide. Why are Zimbabwe guides the best?
You're putting me on the spot here. Yeah, Zimbabwe is a place that is renowned for having the very best guides in Africa. And the reason for that is they go through probably the most intensive guide training experience that any guides in Africa go through. It can take you 5 years to become a guide in Zimbabwe, or even longer. And so they take it very, very seriously. The guides in Zimbabwe love walking too. So they love getting you out on foot off the vehicle with a rifle. The focus is on safety. And then they're really jack of all trades. Some of the best storytellers I've ever heard in Africa, able to take you on canoes, boats, walks, and game drives. But I think probably the best thing about Zimbabwean guides is their language. Zimbabwe is one of the poorest countries in Africa, and yet it has one of the highest English literacy rates across the entire continent. You can go to one of the most remote places in Zimbabwe and speak to somebody and they'll throw out English words that you've never heard of in your life. It's crazy. Like, I literally sometimes want to carry a dictionary when I'm there because they'll throw out these English words and I'm like, what does that even mean? Is that an English word? And they're like, yes. And sure enough, you'll go back into your dictionary and sure enough, it's an English word, you know. So they speak incredible English. They're amazing storytellers. They're just fun, welcoming, friendly, amazing people. So I love the guiding in Zimbabwe.
It's such a beautiful place too. And I know we kind of touched on what makes it a little bit different from Botswana and stuff, but do you want to dive a little bit deeper into that? Like, what are the areas to visit? What sort of things can you do in those areas? What are really the unique selling points of Zimbabwe besides the guiding?
Yeah, absolutely. So Victoria Falls is basically the tourism mecca of Zimbabwe. It's where everything happens. Victoria Falls is the highest volume of water that goes over any waterfall in the world. It is absolutely spectacular, and a visit to Zimbabwe should always include Victoria Falls. And if you like adventure and adrenaline activities, you can go whitewater rafting there, you can go bungee jumping, you can go on these helicopter flips. There's just so much to do in Victoria Falls, and it is stunningly beautiful as well. You can go fishing on the upper Zambezi River, and then very nice to combine that. There's three main regions in in Zimbabwe that I would always recommend on a Zimbabwe itinerary. It's Victoria Falls, then head off to Wangi National Park, which has some incredible wildlife viewing. Do that. And there's no water-based activities there, but they are in Victoria Falls. And then the third destination is one of the remotest places in Southern Africa, and this is called Mana Pools. And Mana Pools is just spectacular. It's right on the border of Zambia, on the lower Zambezi River, and it has some phenomenal options for going on that river, tiger fishing, getting on boats, getting on canoes, doing incredible walks there. And although it doesn't have the game viewing that a place like Wangi will have, or that even Botswana will have, it's one of the most relaxing and most scenically beautiful destinations in Africa. So combining those three regions would make the perfect Zimbabwe itinerary.
I also like Lake Kariba, and I heard Machisodonia has got their wildlife has improved there quite a bit, possibly. So that's a beautiful region.
Oh, Kariba's an amazing place. It's a man-made lake, which was created in the 1960s. It's massive. It's absolutely beautiful. The tourism has crashed there. It's not the place that it used to be. You know, 20, 30 years ago, it used to have big casinos and massive hotels and everything. So maybe that's a good thing that the over-tourism of Kariba has crashed. And now it's more focused on high-end tourism around places like Matusodona. There's also places like Pamushana in Zimbabwe, which are fantastic as well. But the three main regions would be Vic Falls, Wangi, and then Mana Pools.
And can you talk a little bit about what a safari experience would be like in Wangi as crowd-wise versus like peak season Kruger area, and how even if you're in more quiet concessions, you still have more of a remote experience possibly?
Yeah, it's very remote. You know, Wangi is the third largest national park in Africa. So people don't realize that. They think it's a small park. It is absolutely massive. I mean, it goes right down to the Botswana border. There are places, if you had to drive the whole way across Wangi, it'll probably take you 4 days. So give that some thought, and you will not see another person in some of those areas. And Wangi, the tourism is very well controlled in that there are tourism areas which are there for everybody to visit. But then there's restricted access areas where a lot of our camps and our partners' camps are in Africa, which are areas where only the camps that are in those restricted areas can drive. So you're not going to see the congestion that you would see in a place like Kruger National Park. And the same rules apply, where you'd have 4, maximum 5 vehicles to a sighting in Wangi National Park.
Thank
And
you.
Corinne and I were there with James in November, and there were I mean, the only once in a while you'd see another vehicle, and it's from the same camp that we were staying.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't see, it was pretty rare to actually run across another camp's vehicles. I actually, if I think about it, I don't remember that we did. I'm sure we did, but there was research going on. So you'll see some research vehicles popping around. But I couldn't, again, it's just flabbergasting this day and age. You can go to places like that, drive around all morning and all afternoon and all evening and not see anybody else. And anybody that's experienced a crossing at the Mara on the Mara understands that's just really unheard of, I think, in some of these places.
Well, I'm interested since I've been to and I used to go to Zimbabwe a lot as a child, on family vacations, and specifically to Kariba and Mana Pools and Victoria Falls. But you, having not spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe, what was your sort of highlight going last year in November with me?
A couple of the things that first of all, he touched on this a little bit before. It's the people. And I'm talking about everybody you run into these camps, how welcoming, the people of, if you can say that about a country, that's really saying something. The people were number one. I remember every single place we went. I remember the wonderful experiences in Corinne getting the tiger fish between the three of us. There's some things I remember, but a lot of it is the people. But it's also, in Victoria Falls, because we were a little bit north of that, and in Palagena, it's a different experience than you have when you're actually down in the thick of things. And to be able to take a little zippy boat ride up and feel like you're on a sandbar island somewhere, that I didn't expect. Even having been on that river before, I didn't expect those kind of experiences. And the fact, again, you're just the only ones out there. The foot safari that we did when we
that was the best.
I mean,
yeah.
As the sun's starting to drop down, and being able to be on foot and learn how to be quiet, which is tough for Americans.
Tough for you,
really, and I mean dead silent. I mean, and those were some of the interesting things. I loved going when we were up at Tembo Plains going fishing. A couple of days we were out on the boats. Weather it was 111 degrees Fahrenheit one day and about 70 the next with rain sideways. And we all loved it because we thought how different that is. And to be able to look across and see the foothills of the mountains in Zambia, across the river with the rains coming in. I mean, it's just really, it's a spectacular place. The wildlife in Hwangi. James has a pair of night vision binoculars that I think are, and you sit here and watch this. There was a watering hole right out in front of the camp, and you're sitting there and you can watch the elephants come in and you can watch some zebras come in. James pulls his binoculars up and you see lions. You're not seeing that with your naked eye. They're there, and you just don't get a chance to see stuff like that very often. And I think there were some really unique experiences. And I'll sit next to him and say this. I was not really a birding guy. And other people have pointed birds out, and Corinne and I both probably like, oh, that's nice. Now what? With one of the things that I really found fascinating was the bird, the phenomenal. You counted 100 and some up at Tembo Plains, and we weren't there 48 hours.
Yeah.
That's just birds. That's not including all the different wildlife we saw. But that's just some of my thoughts of having been through quite a bit as an American, right? Having seen quite a few different places. I think it really opened our eyes on, wow, this is really special. So special that we're turning around, and which we'll get into here in a minute, and going back to kind of redo the circuit with some folks. And
Doug, this is a perfect segue.
Talk about the wonderful efforts of Great Plains and what they're doing with Project Rewild.
Before we jump into that, Corinne, do we have any questions?
No, I actually just have one who's asked about Sheila. Hi, Sheila. And
Hi, Sheila.
Making sure we can get you information on seasonality and examples of itineraries. And we're more than happy to do that for anybody. We've all traveled there extensively through Africa. So the more you tell us about what you love to do, anybody from the Africa Endeavours team is 100% happy to do that for you.
Sheila's mine. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've already claimed her.
Sheila did say Candace.
Hi,
Want Candace to work. But that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Corinne, I guess this is a good time to cue the Project Rewild video. James, maybe you can talk a little bit about what Project Rewild is, and Doug, you can chat about what you guys are doing this year and what we're looking to do next year. Or I can chat about that part.
Yeah, so this is one of the most ambitious relocations of wildlife ever attempted, and probably one of the largest as well, besides for Currie, which happened in Zimbabwe in the 1960s. We've already moved 101 elephants 2 years ago, and last year we moved a few as well. We've just moved giraffe and zebra, and it's not that Mana Pools needs more wildlife. There's no fences, it's all natural. But there are certain areas in Africa where wildlife is actually doing quite well, but they are fenced. And so as the populations of wildlife increase in those areas, they have basically very limited options. They can either cull or kill those wildlife, those animals, or they can move them to other places. And we were approached by a few reserves in Zimbabwe who had burgeoning wildlife populations and also severe drought at the time happening. And they said to us, we don't really want to cull all these animals, especially elephants. Culling elephants is like killing people to me. And so our owner, Derek and Beverly, they stepped in and said, well, we'll take them and we'll move them, and we'll move them to a paradise. And so we embarked on Project Rewild to move both elephants, zebra, giraffe, and predators like African wild dogs to the Mana Pools region, where we have a stunning camp called Tembo Plains. And in fact, the wild dogs, we have identified a pack of 12 from the one area that we are now going to be moving across, if all goes well, in May, in time for your trip. And so there's a wonderful conservation story about all of this. And we decided on our last trip, Corinne, Doug, and myself, why don't we do a conservation-focused behind-the-scenes trip to Zimbabwe, where we can give you, as our guests, access to go out with researchers, learn more about the Wild Dog Project, learn more about lions in Wangi, learn more about the Elephant Project that we've done in Mana Pools. And we've enlisted the support of some American universities that are doing research on the work that we're doing with these relocated animals. So it gives you a sneak preview behind the scenes that no other guests would ever get to see. We're going to pepper it with some talks from conservation experts in the evenings, etc., but also keep it fun and light and really enjoyable for all of you. So I think you have maybe 1 or 2 trips going this year, and definitely a trip next year as well.
Funny you mentioned that. So the first, after that conversation, we came back, put it together. And again, this is the 3 locations that we've been talking about: Vic Falls, Wangi, and up in Mana Pools. And doing that same circuit that we did, and seeing, can we put this together? Would anybody be interested in doing that? And it sold out in we hardly told anybody about it.
Yeah.
And everyone's, I'm in, without even questioning and ask price, that not because they heard the concept. I think part of it is this is a really interesting story to tell, but also the conservation focus, the fact of who Great Plains is and what they're trying to accomplish with this, and how they run the ship. That has had a lot to do with it. We didn't have to say much other than this is what we just did, this circuit. Now we're going to do it with this focus, just a focus, call it Project Rewild, in support of this. And the first one gone like that, filled up just, again, word of mouth. The second one, Candace, we're looking at queuing up at least 2 more of these in the next cycle. So that is going to be at least 2, if not 3 more, just based on the interest that people have had, largely word of mouth. And I think this gives people a unique opportunity that you're just not going to get if you go on. Listen, these places are wonderful to go to without all this, but having that boosted experience, that elevated experience of getting the behind the scenes, talking to the people doing the work, the researchers, the things that make those areas really interesting, and what the future is going to look like, has been wonderful opportunity for people that are really interested in this. And I think it's been great. It's been wonderful. Great Plains has been um, uh, extraordinary partners in this, because they really are leading the charge in this. So it's we've been very blessed and very thankful that they've been part of this and helping us move this forward. We really appreciate it.
So yeah, I mean, we'd like to invite you on a conservation journey with us, and to actually be partners and bear witness to arguably the largest wildlife relocation in modern times on the African continent. And I think this is a very special opportunity. We're very excited about it. We've got some great other partners involved. We're working with a great partner of ours in Wangi called Vernies. And everybody's come to the table to make this really affordable as well. For example, we actually have a free flight special for this particular trip. Throughout the entire itinerary, all your flights between the camps are baked into the costs of the nightly stays at the camp. So you're not paying additional for flights between each location, which is really special. And so we've kept the costs down. We want you to be part of this, and I think it'll be an amazing experience to see you all out there.
Thanks, James, and thanks, Doug, and thanks everybody for joining. We will send a follow-up email. We do have a few little goodies we're going to raffle off. But we need to collect all of our client information. We'll send you more information on dates for next year if you're interested in the Project Rewild. We do have some tentative dates in place. We're just working on a couple of details. So that information will come soon. I would expect early next week. We're thinking probably early to mid-September 2026. So it gives everybody plenty of time to plan. And then, as I mentioned before, we do have a little bit of a giveaway that we will follow up with you on. And then maybe one little added incentive for the Project Rewild, but you'll have to check your inboxes for that. That'll be coming next week. So thank you, James and Doug, again for this evening and for getting everything set up. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope you learned a lot about Africa and why we love it so much and why you should all go if you haven't been. Any last minute questions before we say goodnight? No, I'm going to take the silence as a no. So thank you all again.
We're going fishing.
Yeah, we're
about
to
So
So thank you all for showing up.
Right out.
A lot to us, and for those of you watching on the record, thank you very much. We do appreciate it. So
thanks, everybody.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.